Welcome back to Volume 25 of Captain Harold DeMarrero's River Stories. We're in the office of Captain Harold DeMarrero today to pick up the story where we left off. Fontaine Johnson had called him and got him to leave school at the University of Memphis, where he was doing quite well, and come and run a boat for him a couple weeks while he made a little deal to get another boat and make them rich men. So he thought he was going to be out there for a few days. He'd been out there for a couple weeks when we left him off. How about picking up the story from there, Cap?
Well, I called Fontaine up. I said, look, I've been out here, 2 weeks. I can't stay out of school much longer, and without it affecting my grades. And I said, you said you would be done with this in a couple of weeks. What's going on? And he said, well, I'm not quite ready. He said, but I'll let you know as soon as it happens. It's real close. And then so 2 weeks went into 4 weeks, and then a month was by, and then 40 days, 50 days, 60 days, and
so now what'd you do about school?
I called him. Actually, I called him by phone and withdrew from the semester, so it wouldn't affect my grades.
And how about your wife that you'd left for a few days? Now you've been out on the river for 2 months.
Well, she was getting that $800. She was happy. 800 along with what she was making, she was doing all right. That was still coming, But I'm sitting there running this boat, 97 days, and I'm like with nothing, like just back and forth, and never seeing anybody. Or
you didn't get off there to go into town and get drunk and lay up for a few days?
No. Was no getting off, man. I mean, I'm waiting on him. And so, anyway, after 97
at least
days,
he was probably sending you a little extra money here and there.
I don't know what he was doing, man, but it sure wasn't in my best interest, I guarantee you that. So, anyway, I called him up on the phone. I said, Fontaine, I'm going to be in Pascagoula in about 4 hours. You drive over here. I want to talk to you. I'm going to bring the boat in. I was on my way to Houston, but I just turned into Pascagoula. It's about 5 miles in, from the channel out there. And I docked. And he came on board and he said, what's wrong? And I said, where's this other boat? And I said, man, I done quit college, had to withdraw, and I says, I could, if I'm going to work as a pilot, man, I can make a lot more than this, and just as pilot wages. And so
you weren't even getting deckhand wages, was you?
$800 a month is less than deckhand wages, So anyway, I
you couldn't afford to take your clothes there, but you was getting taken to the cleaners.
Oh, you got that right, brother. So I told him, I said, look, this is not going to work for me, man. I got to. He said, well, I'll tell you what. And he was one of the slickest shysters that ever lived, man. He said, I'll tell you what, man, I'll make you a deal. He says, why don't you just go ahead and go back to college, and I'll buy your part out. I don't have much money left now, but I can give you $4,000 for your half, of the company. And I told him, I said, well, Fontaine, is that a good deal? He said, well, sure, it's a good deal. I said, well, would you take a deal like that? He said, well, I'd have to. And I said, well, then you got it. And he kind of looked at me real funny. I says, I'm going to give you the $4,000, and I'm going to take the company. So, Fontaine was that kind of guy, though. He says, well, okay. I told you it was a good deal. I told you I'd take the deal, and I did take the deal, which he did. But, the company by then was broke. I mean, he had drawn so much money out of that. It owed so many bills that it was unbelievable.
Well, it would be hard not to, considering you guys was drawing $4,400 a month, then $5,400 out a month on a $10,000 investment. If I could even do that for a few months, I'd be happy as could be.
Well, nobody ever said Fontaine didn't have class. He knew how to live, brother.
You've told me many stories about where he dealt you underhanded, but he also got you the job as the captain of the Delta Queen.
Yeah, he did. He did. Fontaine and I, we were close up until the time he passed away. But anyway, back then, you know, I ended up with a company, and it was paying him about $500 a week till the $4,000 was paid off. And I started running the company, and first thing I had to do was build a crew. So I had the one guy, Wayne Burkett. He was working for me. He was a pilot, and only experience he had before he got with me was he ran a little tug called the Bud S. It was a tiny little thing, you know. But Wayne, I could tell he had it. You know, he had the mechanical smarts to learn. And so I took him kind of under my wing and taught him, you know, actually how to handle a boat, taught him how to flank a boat and things like that. So Wayne made a good hand for me. And then I had a guy came by. I was still living in Memphis at the time. And a guy came by my house. His name was John D. Stroop. Now, John D. was notorious on the river. He was a river bad boy. I mean, he was the kind of guy that would go lead a strike, and then 2 weeks later, he would bust a strike. You know, he used to work for one of the big companies on the river at the time, Mississippi Valley Barge Line, one of the premier companies that are now owned by Chromalloy. But John D. worked for them, and they had a salvage unit where they would go up in barges that were sunk. They had the equipment to get them raised up, repaired, and so forth. And when John D. told me that when business was bad, the guy that was running the company then was a captain. He said, John D., he said, go down there and turn a few fleets loose. They would go down and cut barges loose to the shore, and they would float down and crash into stuff, and then they would have salvage work to do. So anyway, that was John D. And he came to me and he asked me if I would hire him, give him a chance. That, you know, he'd run some boats. Would I give him a chance? And I did. And John D. and I ended up being close friends over the years. But I gave him a chance, and he said, you gave me a chance when nobody else would.
Did he screw you as bad as Fontaine Johnson?
Oh, John D. never screwed me, man. He was a great guy. He would go out. Now, he was a big-time gambler. And he'd get off the boat and go out to some of these big-time card games. And next thing you know, he'd call me and said, I need $1,000 to get out of town, you know. And I would wire him $1,000. And I know he would come back and then work it out. He would stay on that boat until it was paid off. And of course, his wife was one of the greatest cooks I ever had on a boat. And so I got her with him. So they were both on the boat. And I needed a good engineer. So Fontaine told me, he says, why don't you hire my brother-in-law? And I said, he said, he's not a towboat mechanic. His name is Harold Piquet. And he says, but he's a mechanic for some Chevrolet dealership, one of the big ones in New Orleans, and says, you know, he's the chief mechanic and everything in there. So I hired him, and Harold and I got to be friends. And he was a super mechanic. He could take, I had a very complicated engine on that boat. It was a Fairbanks Morris opposed piston. It had pistons going up and down against each other, and two camshafts in it. And so, but Harold kept the thing going.
Okay, so now we got as an engineer and a captain. So let's pick it up next volume. Thanks for everybody watching. Come back and watch some more.